We have learned how to name whole numbers in many different ways. For example, let's use the number 10. You can say 10 as 6 plus 4. You can also say 10 as 5 times 2, or 20 minus 10. All of those are different names for the whole number 10. Today, we're going to learn different ways to name the same part of a whole. Let's think about the fraction 1/2. Let's see if there's other ways to name 1/2, because different fractions can name the same part of a whole. We can use fraction strips to figure this out. The denominators of the fractions tell us what kind of fraction strips to use. So I'm going to see how many fourths are in or equal to 1/2. I used my 1/4 fraction strips and I lined them up with 1/2. And I used two 1/4 fraction strips to equal 1/2. So 1/2 equals 2/4 because that's how many I used. This means that another name for 1/2 could be 2/4. Let's try this with 6. I want to know how many 6 equal 1/2, which means I'm going to take out my fraction strips and I'm going to see how many 6 equal 1/2. I use my 6 fraction strips because the denominator says 6, so I know to use the 6th strips. I line them up with the 1/2 piece and I see that it takes 1, 2, 3 1/6 piece to equal 1/2. So 1/2 equals 3/6. Another name for 1/2 could be 3/6. Fractions that name the same part of a whole are called equivalent fractions. That means that 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent fractions. They equal the same amount. Division facts will help you figure out how to find equivalent fractions. If Mario colored 4/6 of a border, what is the simplest form of 4/6? Simplest form of a fraction is when the numerator and the denominator cannot be divided by the same divisor except for 1. So you want to get it to its simplest form. One way you can do it is to use models. Use your fraction strips to find out what is the simplest form. If I use my fraction strips, first I need to line up 4/6 with my whole. Then I need to pick my biggest parts of a whole, so the numbers with the lowest denominator, and I try to see what matches up. Here I've lined up 1/3 and 2/3. So the simplest form of 4/6 would be 2/3. Another way that you can find the simplest form is to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. One easy trick that you can do is start out with 2. So you could do 4 divided by 2, and whatever you do to the top you have to do to the bottom. So then you would do 6 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the simplest form of 4/6 is 2/3. Let's find the simplest form of 2/4 by dividing. I'm just going to go with 2 because 2 is always a great number to start with. And I'm going to do 2 divided by 2, and whatever I do to my numerator, I have to do to my denominator. So I would do 4 divided by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the simplest form of 2/4 would be 1/2. To review, today we learned that equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal to each other. They take up the same parts of the whole. And simplest form is when both the numerator and the denominator cannot be divided anymore by the same number except for 1. So 2/4 in its simplest form would be 1/2. So now take out your guided practice and do the problems with your teacher.